I saw a mountain, the mountain that is traveled by all those who encounter God and who at some point in their lives have pursued Him. I've seen this mountain before. It's probably one of the very first visions that I had seen. It was actually a different scenario, but it was the same mountain. It was snowing and there were soldiers and things like that. People were camping on the mountain and things like that. But this is the same mountain that was in that vision. But this mountain is now still covered in pine trees, dark pine trees. And up this mountain has a path and a road actually. And the road is clear. There is nothing in the way of this road. You can clearly see the road. You can see the way, the turns where it takes you to the top. That it's just, there's nothing hindering anybody from getting there. And this path seems to be either a fine dust of a road or a paved path that looks like dirt, but it's paved, one of the two of those things. I can't tell. So the very first thing that I see happening on this mountain, I see a truck driving up the mountain, and this truck is from the 50s, and it's got like the bulbous, like it's bulbing in the front, but it's all rusted over. It's completely rusted, and this truck begins the ascension of the mountain, but it doesn't get too far, and it kind of drives off of the path into the trees and gets a half of a mile in and is stopped. But it isn't accidentally doing this. It purposely drives off of the road and continues to press forward on the accelerator into the forest until it can no go any further. The next car I see approaching the mountain and ascending is a car that I would say is from 70s, 80s. And immediately it's a small white car with like a hatchback. And immediately it's out of control. It has no control over what it's doing. It's literally ascending the mountain out of control, spinning. There's no ice. There's no reason for it besides the fact that the car itself is in control of what it's doing. And it's ascending the mountain higher than before, higher than the car before it. And it goes a little bit further, but then it just stalls out and goes further. And at this point, I can see off to the side of the mountain, almost like on a rock. There's a man and a woman standing there, and they're in climbing gear, so they're ready for the hike to the top, and they have these hiking backpacks on that are full. And the man has a map in his hands, and the map is open towards the mountain. And you can see this map, and the map is clearly drawn, and it's clearly has every single thing you would need to know about the area that is on the map. It has every like road access, every river access, every lake, every single possible detail that you would need to know about that is there on the map and given the ability to see it, read it, and know it. At this point, the two of them are standing there, and it's a little difficult. I'm starting to notice that it's a little difficult to see the woman. It's a woman and a man. The woman, she's out of clarity and visibility. She's physically there, but she's a little blurred. And after this, the next car that drives up this is a limousine. And the limousine drives up, and it sort of stops there at the man and the woman. And you can see that this limousine is, it has flags of every nation kind of hanging from the limousine. And you can see the arms of people applauding it. You just see arms and the hands clapping and waving and just bragging on or lifting up, exalting this limousine that arrived. And so the next thing that happens is, and this limousine has many doors, and all these doors open at this point, and men come out of them. And they're sort of men that hold high position, ranking, maybe in military, maybe in Jewish communities and Catholic communities. And what I see happening next is that these men are opening the door to these children that are coming out of the forest. And these children are like indigenous to the forest. They're malnourished and they are sickly and very hungry, and they've got that stomach that is so hungry that it's sort of bulging out. They're small African American children or Ethiopian children. They're just meant to represent the just malnourishment and sickly position of a people of some sort. And these men were ushering them into this limousine, and the people were just lining up. The children, there were children, were lining up to get inside of this limousine. And once they, let me pay attention here. Hold on. Once they were inside of the car, the next thing that happened was these men took out these swords and they stabbed the car. And these swords were meant to almost be like, if you see a casket, they're these like pegs that the people hold, the pallbearers, they hold them and they take the casket to where it needs to be buried. They were like that, but they were swords. And then the men gave them to those small malnourished children to carry up the mountain, but they couldn't go but minimal steps because their ground became sand, and the sand was so thick and so not thick, it was so loose that they began to sink. Their feet were sinking into the sand, so much so that the young children on the right side of it just began to slip down off the side of the mountain and just be consumed by the sand. They just started to fall into the sand. It was like quicksand to them, and they just kind of fell down the mountain into the quicksand, and it covered them. And so this situation was no more. It could not go any further. It could not continue up the mountain. And then after this was focused on this man and this woman. And I began to understand who they were. And the man represented, I believe, Jesus, and the woman represented to be the bride. And at first I couldn't understand why I couldn't see her clearly, or that she was blurry, but it was on purpose. She was very distracted and she was very preoccupied. And he was holding the map and he was directing her what to do, but she couldn't even stay focused at all. She was so distracted and she kept doing other things. She was moving these jugs underneath her feet. Maybe they were gasoline or holding some sort of liquid. They reminded me of like those red gasoline things that you refill a car with. They were just full and sitting there, and she just kind of moved them. And then she had a compass in her pocket she was messing with, and she just was not. And I felt like it was me for a minute. Like I can't focus on her, Lord. I can't see her. I kept saying to him, I can't move on to this vision because I can't see her. I don't know what she's doing. What is she doing? And she was messing with her hair, and she just was so unorganized. And finally the Lord showed me that, yes, that is exactly what I was meant to see. And the interesting thing was the man who represented the Lord, first he grabbed her face and tilted her chin towards his eyes and fixed her eyes on him. And when he did this, it did not response I initially thought it would. At first, she just sort of allowed him to take the items that were distracting her or taking up, space or whatever, the gods. I don't know what they were, but they were not meant to be there. And she sort of got rid of them or allowed him to take them, but she was ashamed of herself. There was nothing there that showed me in her face or her response that she was considering the Lord holy or considering him doing something for her benefit. It was very much like she felt shame for sure. She did not willingly desire to give up these items. So that's what happened at first, but he never stopped grabbing her face and fixing her eyes on him. Eventually, she began to see, and she chose not to take her eyes off of him. And she began to willingly take things off of her that didn't belong. And she took off her backpack and she kept her eyes fixed on him. She took off her backpack and she opened it and she started throwing things out. And there were books in there, I'm sure, representing, knowledge. And there were other things in there. There was like a blanket on top that had like some sort of vegetable wrapped up in it. Like she just had the most odd things, but to her, they were things that kept her distracted. And so she began to take apart the bag until it was empty. She even dipped it upside down so that nothing remained in there. And then things just began to be of no worth to her, a distraction to her, and her eyes remained fixed. And at this point, she began to build something. And I couldn't tell at first what she was building. But she didn't keep her eyes, she would look at the item as she was building it, but she would also keep her eyes on the Lord. She was still fixed on him. But obviously when you're building something, you also look at the thing you're building. Maybe she wasn't supposed to. I don't know that. But I know that she was sent to keep her eyes fixed on the Lord. And it began to be built out of a strong metal. And it was meant to represent the armor of God. But it was a rebuilding of the armor of God because it was done with the fixation of the eyes of the bride on Christ. So it was different and new and right and true. And there was no holes. There was no seeping. There was nothing that could get through this armor. There was no seams that were fixed together. Nothing could penetrate through any gaps or holes. This armor was fully built the proper way that it was meant to be built. And the last just scene that I saw, I know that she was meant to climb this mountain. I know that she was given the map to do so. I know the path was cleared for her to do so. And the last image that I saw was her in this armor and with her sword, and she was ready to ascend this mountain of no victory of her own, but a victory of the Lord, and no banner of her own, but a banner of the Lord. So she was ready at that point, and that was it.